every Kanye West album ranked, from least favorite to most favorite. Solo albums only, no collabs, that means no kissy ghosts, no vultures, thank God. This ranking is purely based on how much I personally like each album. You my Chick-fil-A! Having Jesus is King as Ye's worst solo album is an obvious but correct choice. I've seen other Kanye album rankings, and while everyone I've seen puts JIK at the bottom, many still claim it's a pretty good album. And like, no, Jesus is King is not a good album. It's not even average, it's straight up bad. It's obviously not as bad as the Vulture series, but it's easily his most disappointing solo effort to date, apart from Donda 2 if that counts. Bear in mind, Ye was also working on the now scrapped Yandy at the time, with many of his snippets and leaks sounding far more promising than what ended up on Jesus is King. So when JIK was released instead of the highly anticipated Yandy, it felt like a massive slap in the face. The sudden shift from scrapping Yandy to creating JIK felt rushed, and that sense of rush is reflected in how unfinished many of the songs sound. Take Follow God for example. While it does feature a good soulful sample based beat reminiscent of old school Kanye, Ye's performance over it is underwhelming. He raps in one flat repetitive flow throughout its brief 2 minutes runtime, failing to match the energy or the depth the beat deserves. And if his flow wasn't repetitive enough, just take a look at these lyrics. It's a track that could have easily benefited if more effort and time was put into it. It could have had flow switch ups, an interesting hook, another verse, maybe even a bridge. The beat had so much potential, but Ye just completely wastes it. It's nearly as much of a wasted beat as Lift Yourself. Another thing that makes Jesus is King so disappointing is that Ye had already proven himself as being so fantastic at incorporating gospel and religious elements into his music on past releases. For example, on the Life of Pablo, the performances delivered by the Sunday service choir on Ultralight's Beam are some of the most beautiful moments on the entire record, but on Jesus is King, there really aren't any amazing moments like that. Sure, there are still some decent songs like Salah, but I wouldn't consider any of these highlights to be among Kanye's best. They wouldn't even crack a top 50 for me. I usually don't mind when Ye spits out silly lines, but the Chick-fil-A mention on Closed on Sunday just felt too stupid and out of place over a gospel guitar instrumental. My favourite songs here are Salah, Use This Gospel, and God Days. Least favourite, Closed on Sunday. This is the first genuinely good album on the list. Just because it's ranked low doesn't mean it's bad. This placement is more a reflection of how consistently amazing his discography is. 808s and Heartbreak was a massive game-changing moment for Ye, even if people didn't realize it at the time. While Graduation was still praised upon release, some hip-hop fans already felt it was a step away from his early traditional rap sound due to its pop-oriented direction. So if Graduation's pop appeal disappointed some rap fans, imagine how they felt when Kanye fully embraced a moody electro-pop and synth-pop sound on 808s and Heartbreak. And while Ye wasn't the first artist to use heavy autotune as an artistic tool, we had people like T-Pain before him, who was even featured on Graduation. Ye was one of the first to channel raw, unfiltered emotion and pain through that autotuned voice. As many already know, 808s and Heartbreak was released in the wake of two major personal tragedies: the passing of his mother and a breakup with his then fiancée, Alexis Pfeiffer. So during what was clearly a deeply emotional period, it made sense for Ye, despite not being the strongest singer, to express those feelings himself rather than bringing in a more technically gifted vocalist. That choice added to the record's authenticity, making it easier to connect with his pain, his emotions and thoughts, even if it was rough around the edges at times. Now personally, I wouldn't rank 808s as one of his best albums, but looking back, it's become the most influential album in his entire catalogue. Within just a few years, rappers were borrowing heavily from what Ye was doing on 808s, building their own styles from the seeds it planted. What Drake did on Take Care, or what emo SoundCloud rappers like Lil Uzi Vert were doing on their breakout mixtapes, those are directions they likely wouldn't wouldn't have ventured into without 808s and Heartbreak. It marked another moment in Ye's discography where he was ahead of the curve, and over time he proved to the doubters that what he was doing on this record was nothing short of a game-changing moment. So 808s as a whole has proven to age well over the years and gone on to have a massive impact on the rap game despite it not even being a rap album. However, to say 808s was the best execution of this sound, even if it was the first one to do it, would be a stretch. Yeah, you have the innovative hit Heartless, but then there's See You in My Nightmares, which is still one of his worst songs of all time. Pinocchio's Story is pretty unlistenable too, and even though there are a decent handful of highlights on this album, I wouldn't say any of them rank among Ye's best songs ever. Street Lights is the only exception, by far the best song here. Favorite tracks: Welcome to Heartbreak, amazing. Love Lockdown, Paranoid, Street Lights, Coldest Winter, least favorite, See You in My Nightmares.
I am the glow gab.
Donda is nearly everything I wanted Jesus is King to be. Some of the most gospel inspired tracks on Donda are actually some of my favorites. The choir vocals and uplifting lyrics on 24 are genuinely moving, especially during the refrain and bridge where the Sunday service choir chants, "We gonna be okay and God's not finished." Kanye's vocal performance here is full of emotion and passion too. In many ways, Donda is like if the Life of Pablo and the untapped potential of Jesus is King had a baby. Like the Life of Pablo, Donda has a long track list, a wide range of features, and some undeniable bangers. And like Jesus is King, the album sees Ye speaking in depth about his Christian faith, incorporating several gospel influenced tracks into the mix. While it's clear that more time and effort went into Donda than Jesus is King, the album still feels rough around the edges and at times incomplete. Ye's decision to make the album clean, removing all profanity, feels like an afterthought. Rather than awkwardly censoring the swear words, it would have been smoother if he just told the featured guests to not swear in the first place. Also, with how much the songs changed from one listening party to the next, it would have been much smoother if Ye had actually finished the songs before hosting those events. Not that the listening parties affected my own personal experience of the final album, but they do reflect how Donda still doesn't feel like a complete finalized project. I also believe the concept behind naming the album after his mother is not as clear or deeply explored as it could have been. Out of all the songs here, Life of the Party dives deepest into themes of motherhood and Donda West, but even that track was not part of the original track list. It is only on the deluxe version. With a track list this long, there are bound to be some duds. Tell the Vision is honestly a disrespectful tribute to Pop Smoke. The audio quality is comparable to any number of terrible demos from posthumous albums released by money-hungry music labels. The choruses on OK OK and Remote Control are terrible too. God Breathed suffers from its 5-minute runtime, and Ye just straight up rips off Playboy Carti in Junior. As great as Donda is, it's still a bloated record with filler. If it had been trimmed down to around 13 tracks, it would have made for a much tighter and more cohesive listen. Still, it's a great album overall, and there are definitely some near perfect tracks on it. Come to Life and the earlier mentioned 24 will go down as two of Kanye's best songs of this decade. Other favorite tracks are Jail, Off the Grid, Hurricane, Praise God, Jonah, Believe What I Say, Moon, Heaven and Hell, Keep My Spirit Alive, Jesus Lord, Lord I Need You, and No Child Left Behind. Also, Life of the Party is on the deluxe version, so I can't include it here.
Hurry up with my damn croissants.
Creating an experimental industrial hip-hop album as the follow-up to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, an album that was far more accessible, granted presentation, and nowhere near industrial, was a massive risk. And what was even a bigger risk was opening this record with one of the least accessible album openers in Kanye's discography on site. While Yeezus doesn't contain one of Kanye's most consistently enjoyable track lists, it's an album that just grows on me more and more each time I listen to it. While there had already been some groundbreaking experimental hip-hop albums before Yeezus, it was the first time I can recall an artist as mainstream and commercially successful as Kanye West diving into that space. The most thriving industrial hip-hop releases that were released at the time were still fairly underground. While Yeezus may not have been the most cutting edge or boundary pushing entry into the genre, Kanye's approach was still unique, fun, and ultimately did more good than harm. The album contains some of Kanye's best songs to have ever come out of the 2010s, like Bound 2, Black Skinhead, On Sight, and Blood on the Leaves. Bound 2 especially, it is easily one of the most creatively produced rap songs of the 2010s, and one of Ye's best songs of all time. However, the record does also contain some of his most forgettable songs ever, like I Am God. I swear I could listen to Yeezus a million times and still not remember a single thing about that track. Pretty much all the songs that aren't highlights are kind of a mess too. I'm sorry, but I just can't get myself to like Hold My Liquor. It's kinda mid. Was Yeezus more mind-blowing at the time than other releases in the genre? No. But Yeezus is still certainly a very unique and interesting moment in Kanye's career. It also sounds the most out of place stylistically when compared to his other albums, apart from 808s and Heartbreak. You can compare Late Registration and the College Dropout because of their soul chops, or the gospel influences in Jesus is King and Donda, but no other Kanye album sounds quite like Yeezus, and that's one of the main reasons Yeezus is such an intriguing moment in his catalogue. Yes, the lyrics here are stupid and silly, but that's part of what makes the album enjoyable. His braggadocious, in-your-face and humorous energy is what makes Yeezus such a fun listen, and his ridiculous and bizarre lyrics match the ridiculous and bizarre energy of the beats. Still, while the lyrical content is entertaining, I'll admit it doesn't come close to the level of lyricism he achieved on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and not every single line here works. Star Wars fur, yeah, I'm rocking Chewbacca. Ugh, Guilt Trip is so ass. I guess when you also compare it to the stuff he released before, Yeezus could be seen as a disappointing album, especially since it was the follow-up to MDTF. But on the other hand, considering the massive risk Ye took by diving into a subgenre he hadn't explored before, it could have been a lot worse. My favorite tracks are the earlier mentioned On Sight, Blood on the Leaves, Black Skinhead, Bound 2, and New Slaves is also one of the best songs here, with its gorgeous outro that manages to contrast well with the chaos that came before it. And finally, Send It Up is a criminally underrated banger, and my least favorite is Guilt Trip.
Beautiful morning, beautiful.
When The Life of Pablo came out in 2016, the original version of the record felt rough around the edges and sounded unfinished. Thankfully, in 2018, many of those issues were improved across the board. The 2018 updated version is the one I will be talking about here. The most significant improvement was the inclusion of Saint Pablo, which might be my favorite album closer in Ye's entire discography. On The Life of Pablo, or TLOP for short, Ye once again brought in a wide range of artists to feature on the record. It might even be more packed with features than My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Having this many features was a very exciting moment for Ye, as one of his greatest strengths as an artist is his ability to match the right artist to the right track, and that is proven from how he handles the guests in the track list. For instance, there couldn't have been a more fitting artist than The Weeknd to handle the chorus on FML. Ty Dolla $ign's vocals also add to the sentimental and betrayed emotions conveyed in Real Friends, one of my favorite songs on the record. This collab between the two is also better than anything from the Vulture series. Ye also gets chance to deliver his greatest featured verse ever on the album opener Ultralight Beam, and then Father Stretch My Hands Part 1 has the most iconic Kid Cudi moment since the early Man on the Moon days. I often see people giving Ye all the flowers for the success of this track, but I don't really think that's fair. It's really Metro and Cudi who carry it. All Ye does is drop that bleach my asshole line, which is a complete turn off. That line would have sounded fine on some unhinged banger from Yeezus, but not on a track that basically became the defining anthem of summer 2016. Famous is also the most Kanye song he's ever made. Getting Rihanna to sing the Nina Simone interpolation was a fantastic decision. As a massive Nina Simone fan, I'm really glad that Rihanna did justice to the original song, and the instrumental outro is the most classic Kanye moment on the entire record. It might honestly be the most College Dropout sounding thing to ever land on a Kanye album that isn't the College Dropout. So the majority of the featured guests on the record bring fantastic performances that complement their respective songs really well. Even though it had only been 3 years since Yeezus dropped, it felt like hip hop had already gone through a decade's worth of changes and trends in the mainstream. Trap rap had evolved and become more dominant prevalent, while contemporary R&B was increasingly being fused into hip-hop, thanks to the lasting influence of 808s and Heartbreak and artists like Drake. With all this going on, Ye was clearly bringing his own ideas into what was trendy at the time. He leaned further into trap territory, like getting Metro Boomin on the previously mentioned Father Stretch My Hands, and brought in the most popular R&B artists at the time, like Ty Dolla $ign, The Weeknd, and even Frank Ocean, who also appeared on Watch the Phone. Ye's ability to merge these musical trends and collaborators into a sound that still felt uniquely his ended up overshadowing much of what was popular in hip-hop at the time. That said, there are still some low points, things that were never going to be good no matter how many improvements Ye made to the final 2018 version. Like at this point in 2018, Designer's Panda had already come and gone. Nobody was listening to it anymore, the song got old fast. It was a hit that also cemented Designer's reputation as a one-hit wonder, so including a remix of a song that was already stale by 2018 just feels out of place. It wasn't even a good remix to begin with. Still though, the Life of Pablo has a very high hit and miss ratio. He also proves he can still rap at a high level on No More Parties in LA, somehow delivering a verse packed with as many great bars as Kendrick's. My favourite songs here: Ultralight Beam, Father Stretch My Hands Part 1, Famous, Feedback, FML, Real Friends, Wolves, 30 Hours, No More Parties in LA, Facts, the Charlie Heats version, and Saint Pablo. And Part 2 is the worst song here.
None of us would be here without come.
I know ranking this album higher than the Life of Pablo is controversial, but let me just say, choosing whether I should rank TLOP above Ye or the other way around was easily the hardest decision I had to make for this entire list. Honestly, which one I prefer really depends on the day. I ultimately went with Ye here because I think it's more consistent, though TLOP is still the better produced album. So don't fool yourself into thinking I believe the gap in quality between TLOP and Ye is gigantic. It's really not. If I were to rate both albums, they'd probably have the exact same score. Lately, I've just been more in the mood to listen to Ye. Ye is, I think, the most underrated album in his catalogue, even though it features one of his most popular songs ever, Ghost Town. The album showed Kanye in rare form, especially in how vulnerable and personal the lyrics were. We saw an emotional and private side of him that we haven't seen since 808s and Heartbreak, which was already a decade old by the time Ye dropped. In fact, I'd even say the lyrical content on Ye is even more open and more vulnerable than on 808s. Since the release of Ye, I've seen many people heavily underrate it, probably because there were other 7-track Kanye related albums at the time that generated more conversation. While I do admit the albums I ranked below this one have better production, the emotions carried by many of the songs on this record makes it feel more human and easier to connect with. It's genuinely so admirable how open and honest Kanye is on this album. Yes, you still get those silly lines on tracks like All Mine, but we also have Violent Crimes, where Ye expresses his love for his daughter and his anxious need to constantly protect her from harm and danger. It's heartwarming and touching. It was the first time I cried to a Ye song since Roses, even though we did later find out that Ye didn't write all the lyrics to Violent Crimes. His verses on The Beautiful Wouldn't Leave and No Mistakes were revealing too. It's moments like these on the album that makes me wish the entire track list consisted of chill hip-hop songs like No Mistakes, Ghost Town, Violent Crimes and Wouldn't Leave, tracks where Ye truly exposed this vulnerable side of himself. Having Yikes and All Mine in the mix, as much as I enjoy those songs, disrupted the album's flow and created too big of a mood change for the listening experience to impact me even more emotionally, even though the whole album is only 7 songs. Getting hit with a painfully beautiful Wouldn't Leave, which has emotionally touching lines like told her she could leave now but she wouldn't leave, right after hearing that silly calm line from All Mine. It's maybe not the best time and place. I've been listening to this album for years now, and this sudden shift in mood from All Mine to Wouldn't Leave still throws me off a bit. I'm not saying those 2 cuts should be taken out, definitely not, but I just wish the album was longer and included more of these emotional, personal and revealing tracks. It would have been a more sensational listen and probably ranked higher on the list. It's also worth pointing out that even though I love Wouldn't Leave, it hasn't aged all that well. The song is about Ye and Kim fighting through challenges and Ye keeping their marriage stable, something that feels different now considering, as you probably know, they're no longer together. Much of the material on Ye is so good that its biggest flaw is how short the album is. Ye is still a fantastic and underrated project, and it's beautifully written too. It just feels so human. Also, going back to Ghost Town, it is still one of the greatest songs in Ye's entire catalogue, Violent Crimes as well. My favourite tracks from Ye are basically all of them except for the opening song. Graduation is Ye's most commercially successful album yet, and it certainly sounds like it, with Kanye slightly shifting away from the soul and jazz influences of the College Dropout and Late Registration, and moving towards a more accessible pop rap direction. This shift has resulted Graduation as being the weakest project in the College Bear trilogy, but by no means is it anything less than a fantastic album. Some of Kanye's own twists on the pop rap sound resulted in innovative tracks that remain groundbreaking to this day, like Flashing Lights. However, Ye's attempts at pop rap aren't all fireworks. Good Life clearly shows Ye trying to jump on the trendy chart-topping sound of the time, and as a result, it has aged poorly, even though it is a cheerful and light-hearted song. Drunk and Hot Girls is so awful that Kanye fans once collectively agreed it was his worst song. That was before Cousins, so looking back, maybe we were a bit too harsh on that track, but it's still awful. And Big Brother, while I do like this song, hasn't aged well either, largely because Ye and Jay-Z's relationship has been so rocky ever since it was released. On top of that, it's become harder to connect with the emotions in the song due to what they're like as people now. I can't see myself feeling as inspired and emotionally connected by Ye's appreciation and admiration for Jay-Z's impact on his life and career as I once was, especially now that both of them seem to be supporters of the Diddler. It's still a good song, but I can't help feeling a bit uneasy when I hear it now. Despite these complaints, a few of the highlights here are some of his most innovative songs in his entire career. The album also includes one of his most consistently enjoyable track lists, and the production for the most part is outstanding. The sample flips on I Wonder and Champion are still mind-blowing today. Graduation has also proven to be quite influential as Ye's shift to a pop rap sound after releasing 2 strict hip hop records was a change that, while controversial to the rap community at the time, inspired other hip hop artists down the road to be more comfortable infusing pop elements into their own music. Favorite tracks: Good Morning, Champion, Stronger, I Wonder, Can't Tell Me Nothing, Flashing Lights, Everything I Am, The Glory, Homecoming, and I guess Big Brother too. Also, if we're including the bonus tracks, yeah, they're easy highlights as well. Least favorite: Drunk and Hot Girls. Kanye was still in his prime when creating Late Registration. The sound of this album is reminiscent of the College Dropout. You still get those soul samples and chipmunk sung vocals, but Kanye's love for jazz and even orchestral music is showcased more heavily than ever before. Late Registration is still one of his best produced albums. There are some fantastic uses of samples on this album, like on Touch the Sky, which samples one of my favorite soul songs of all time, Curtis Mayfield's Movin' Up. There's also the beat on Celebration that planted one of the seeds of Tyler the Creator's signature production style. What Late Registration has that even some of Kanye's better albums don't is a track list with as many near perfect highlights as this one. Not only that, but the entire record is over 2 decades old and has aged better than many of his albums that came after it. Diamonds from Sierra Leone Remix may be the greatest Jay-Z and Kanye collab song ever if you're not counting Heart of the City. It overshadows every cut from Watch the Throne. Roses is one of his most devastating songs he's ever written. It features some of his most thoughtful and painful verses ever, detailing the stressful moments surrounding his grandmother's near-death experience, while also incorporating his sense of humor to lighten the mood. It's the best song on Late Registration. celebration. Hey Mama is another personal track and is one of the most heartwarming cuts in Ye's entire catalogue. He still brings the fun and witty sense of humour from the College Dropout to this album for the second and last time in his catalogue. As near flawless as the record is, the track-to-track flow isn't as consistent and well put as it was on the College Dropout. The skits are still hilarious, but the context of each skit isn't as clear as it was on TCD2. But as far as complaints go, it really ends there. There really aren't any skips here, and for the tracks that could have ended up being duds, they're made up for due to their great beats. My favourite songs here are basically all of them apart from Celebration, but even Celebration has a great beat.
I'm feeling a light to decent 6 on this thing.
My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is what many people regard as Ye's magnus opus, and it's not hard to see why. The music is far more massive and rich than anything he has done before or even after. After making a complete 180 from hip hop and crafting a 11-track album consisting solely of auto-tune singing with no rapping or even swearing, many hip hop fans at the time were disappointed at this unexpected change in sound. There was also that infamous MTV incident that followed this that seemed like the complete downfall for his career at the time. Returning back to his hip hop roots with a 13-track album, grabbing features from some of the most trending and important artists from the genre at the time, from Drake to one of Wu-Tang's best members Raekwon, was a much needed move. It not only gave him a second victory in his career, but also further solidified his place in the hip hop GOAT conversation. Ye's pen game was in top form, with Gorgeous featuring some of his most standout verses of his entire career. The whole first verse is still mind-blowing to this day. There's also that one line he drops on So Appalled that makes it hard to believe the Kanye from back then and the Kanye of 2025 are even the same person. Ye was really flexing his lyrical abilities when he returned to hip-hop. He really wanted to let people know that he was still above the rest when it came to hip-hop artistry upon returning to the genre. Power took 5,000 hours to create, and it's clear to see why. Devil in a New Dress might feature the best rap beat of the entire 2010s decade. The opening piano note of Runaway is one of the most iconic moments in hip-hop history. Kanye even gets Nicki Minaj and Rick Ross to deliver the best rap verses of their entire careers. You can argue that MDTF has a few duds. While I do enjoy Lost in the World, I still think that Poem doesn't really hit. But the highs on this album easily stand toe to toe with the highs of some of the greatest hip hop albums of all time. Honestly, I love every track on here. Jesus works! The College Dropout isn't just my favourite Kanye album, it's also one of my favourite hip hop albums of the entire 2000s decade. It's been a long time since Ye has sounded this likeable, this fun, and this humorous on an album. You can hear it in his delivery. It genuinely sounds like he had a blast making this record. Tracks like the new Workout Plan and Breathe In Breathe Out are full of playful energy, and at times it even sounds like he's trying not to laugh while delivering certain lines. And his charisma and sense of humor on this record gives the album so much likable personality. But the album isn't all jokes. On Jesus Walks, he turns serious, expressing both his love for Jesus and his frustration with how mainstream media and the radio often ignore music that promotes Christianity. The track contains one of the most groundbreaking rap beats to have ever come out of the 2000s decade. Then there's Family Business, a beautifully heartwarming and personal cut filled with nostalgia and reflections on his own family. Ye has never made another song as endearing as this. The skits add even more personality and charm, helping to elevate the album's already strong character. Again, Ye comes off as incredibly likable here, a quality I wish had remained more consistent in his later albums. Even though I do enjoy the Life of Pablo, Donda, Yeezus, etc., the humor, the warmth, and the personality just don't feel as joyous and relatable as they did on the College Dropout. I have to talk about the production too, because I personally believe this is one of the best produced rap albums of the 2000s, right up there with Mad Villainy, Donuts and Prime Nujabes. The chorus on Through the Wire is still one of the most innovative uses of a vocal sample I've ever heard. The beat on Two Words 2 is so rich in detail. The lyrics on TCD range from hilarious and silly to clever and genuinely inspiring. There's the funny PhD line on Breathe In Breathe Out and that MJ line on Slow Jams, but then you get those last set of bars in Through the Wire that has Ye turning his own near-death tragedy into something deeply uplifting and motivational. Ye's creativity was out of this world when creating this project. While I do believe MDTF reaches higher highs, the College Dropout wins overall by a tiny bit with its groundbreaking production and consistency. In another world, I do wish Ye had stayed this charismatic, fun, creative and happy. If that had been the case, maybe we wouldn't have gotten Vultures 1 and 2, and maybe we wouldn't have witnessed the devastating downfall of someone who was once one of the most refreshing voices hip-hop had to offer. Every song here is a favourite.
You gonna make it, and when you make it, keep the same perspective.
Comment down below your Kanye rankings and let me know which other musician discographies you'd like me to rank next. Right now I'm considering Black Sabbath, David Bowie, John Coltrane, A Tribe Called Quest or the Beatles, so leave a comment if you want me to rank any of their albums.